In 2008, one of the strangest and most unbelievable alien abductions in the history of Ukraine occurred. 34-year-old Vladimir Voronezhsky and his 29-year-old wife Olga, both alleged to be taken by extraterrestrials. Both claimed that on board the ship they would be subject to medical experiments and also converse with the beings. In addition, the beings expressed a strong desire to understand human emotion, something we have seen quite a bit. The story garnered quite a bit of attention in Ukraine, with the couple appearing on the TV show Pro-Life in Moscow, Russia, and also passing a polygraph. In this episode, we will examine this incredibly weird case, the alien abduction of Vladimir and Olga Voronezhsky. On the evening of January 11th, 2008, Olga Voronezhsky was relaxing at home, enjoying her maternity leave. Olga needed to pick up a few things from the store, so she asked two of her daughters, 9-year-old Vanessa and 8-year-old Angelica, to run out to the store for her. The two girls would head out, and when they returned home, they reported a strange object up in the sky. According to the girls, the object was flashing white, yellow, and red, and didn't appear like anything they had ever seen. Olga thought they were mistaken, but soon agreed to go outside and look. There, she would spot a strange yellow light in the distance, but being pretty far away and pretty high up, Olga and her husband didn't think too much of it. The family would then return inside and soon went to bed. Around 2 a.m. on January 12th, 2008, Vladimir woke up to a white, violet light in his room. He glanced, rolled over, and fell back asleep, not thinking too much of it. His daughter Angelica, though, wouldn't be able to sleep through it. She woke up to the light shining through her blinds, then ran into her parents' room and woke up her mom, Olga. As Olga woke up, she was frightened and shook her husband Vladimir until he got up. She then screamed at him to look up to the sky, and to their surprise, their ceiling was completely transparent. There was a huge disc-shaped UFO flying right over their bedroom. Vladimir and Olga hurried outside to view the craft. Then, the two, engulfed in the light, became paralyzed and couldn't move. Olga would then start to hover and be pulled upward. She was spinning as she was ascending, and would later recall she couldn't move. Vladimir would then be pulled up, and soon the two woke up in a transparent room, both paralyzed, unable to move. Soon 12 beings would enter the room. They were all short, around 3.5 feet tall, gray, with black lifeless eyes and 3 fingers. While these appeared to be grays, Vladimir would later recall the beings wore hoods that covered their faces most of the time. There was one being who appeared to be the leader. He stood in the back and was around 6 feet tall. His face was covered completely, but his body resembled a man's. The entities would then grab Olga and drag her into a chair nearby. An upset Vladimir, now free from his paralysis, ran toward Olga, but hit some type of invisible wall. 2 small beings approached him and informed him telepathically he needed to calm down, and that they would soon be home safe. Vladimir, though, wasn't satisfied with the answer and became increasingly hostile. The beings, seemingly confused, tried to subdue Vladimir, but Vladimir was a martial arts expert and was able to escape from them. The bewildered aliens would continue to telepathically ask Vladimir why he resisted, as if his efforts were pointless. They stared straight into his eyes each time they telepathically spoke with him, and oddly the language Vladimir heard was Syriac, which is a combination of Russian and Ukrainian languages. Regardless of his efforts, though, the beings were able to overtake Vladimir. They then stuck 4 metallic rods into his chest, and Vladimir was completely paralyzed. He couldn't move at all other than his eyes, and he was forced to watch the beings experiment on his wife. The experiments on Olga were surely strange. While Olga was standing up, they had managed to slice open her stomach, although Olga never felt a thing, she says. She was asked to lay down, and as she did, she could see the inside of her stomach and also smell her organs. Olga would watch as the entities extracted samples from her organs. She felt no pain at all, and after they were done, they used some type of tool to stitch her back up. Amazingly, her stomach had no scars whatsoever, and it looked like nothing had even happened. During the operation, the aliens communicated telepathically with her and informed her they wouldn't hurt her and that they were just curious. One interesting thing surrounding the procedure is just prior to it, Olga had been having stomach pains, and after this operation, her pain would stop. While this was occurring, Vladimir underwent some experimentation as well. The beings would insert some sort of round object into his head. Although Vladimir reported no pain, they informed him that the male species appeared to be more developed than the female species. Vladimir was then taken to another room where he was introduced to a 6-foot-tall being the smaller aliens referred to as the Professor. In a prior episode on this channel, the Maury Rivera Alien Abduction, a being was described by alien abductees as named the Professor. However, there appears to be differences between the two, and it doesn't seem this is the same being here. Vladimir would ask the Professor why they were taken, to which the Professor responded, "It has to be done." He did inform Vladimir, though, to compensate for their suffering, the two would be taken on a tour throughout the galaxy. Olga and Vladimir were then placed in recliners, and the room turned fully transparent. The stars and planets were all around them. Then a bright flash occurred, and the two were now hovering over an unknown planet. The beings then guided them to another room where they boarded a smaller craft, which was cigar-shaped. They then broke off from the mothership and flew down to the planet below. There, they appeared to be mounds, similar to anthills, where the beings lived, and Vladimir speculated they lived under the surface. According to the Professor, the planet operated under a strict set of rules, similar to an ant colony or beehive. The Professor would go on to tell him that the beings didn't eat or drink, but absorbed nutrients through the skin. They were interested in us because we, human beings, display characteristics such as happiness, sadness, jealousy, and other emotions. The beings lived more like machines. The two would travel up to the mothership again, and soon another flash of light was emitted. Olga and Vladimir were at a different place in outer space now. At this point, Vladimir would ask how they were able to travel so quickly. The Professor would explain how they did it, but Vladimir said he couldn't understand it. While this was disappointing, surely Vladimir couldn't have retained more of the answer. It must be pointed out, he did mention wormholes to the beings, and that didn't appear to be how they did it. After the explanation, though, allegedly, according to Vladimir, one of the smaller beings was upset and telepathically told the Professor they know too much now. Vladimir was able to hear this, and a conversation ensued whether they should be terminated or not returned home. According to Vladimir, he became hostile and threatened to become violent and uncooperative if they kept him in outer space. Things seemed to calm down after this, and what happened next would be perhaps the most shocking aspect of this story. Vladimir, with Olga in the room, was asked by several of the beings to have sex with a female being. According to Vladimir, the woman was hideous, though. She was bald with green skin. Vladimir rejected her, citing her appearance to the beings. The extraterrestrials, though, were very interested in how humans had sexual intercourse, and Vladimir seemed to think him and his wife's return to Earth depended on this. The aliens then walked the female alien to a platform where a bright light shone down on her. After the light faded, a new woman appeared, one with a beautiful face, exactly Vladimir's taste. Vladimir then came to the stunning realization they had read his mind in terms of what he believed a beautiful woman should look like. Still, though, oddly, The being's body was being covered up by some sort of sheet in front of her, and Vladimir couldn't see the body. As the beings were sizing up whether Vladimir would go forward now, soon the sheet would disappear and Vladimir began to make love with the being. At this point, Olga screamed at the extraterrestrials to make it stop. The beings, though, not only wanted to understand human sexual intercourse, but wanted to gauge Olga's emotions and the feelings of jealousy. After Olga became increasingly upset, Vladimir would soon stop. Olga would explain to the beings that humans don't just mate, that there must be feelings and emotions involved. Since the beings couldn't have these feelings, emotions of jealousy, love, and anger, this is what they wanted to understand. The professor would ask the two how they were able to survive with their emotions. The professor would also tell them that death didn't exist and implied that humans would be reincarnated. At this point, Olga and Vladimir were returned home. The beings stated they would contact them again in 2 years, the year 2010. The next day, the two woke up and both initially thought it was a dream. They then both soon realized it wasn't and began discussing the incident and the identical memories they had. Vladimir would soon call a friend in Kiev and was put in touch with ufologist Yuri Stepanov. Stepanov would perform hypnotic regression on Vladimir. Vladimir was able to remember some additional things, such as a plasma field surrounding the craft. Soon the two would have a medical examination done to see if any alien implants had been put in them. None were found. One other strange effect of the incident was that Vladimir's gray hair turned back to its original black color. Olga would also experience unexplainable medical effects. Her chronic colitis was cured. It's not known whether the two were contacted again in 2010, but like many UFO cases, there were many skeptics. Locals accused the couple of being drunks and crazy. They were able to appear on television though, and the case became quite popular. Still, what can we make of this incredibly bizarre case? Like many alien abductee cases, there is no tangible proof, and most of the credibility of the case comes from the reliability of the witnesses. Although Vladimir and Olga were able to pass a lie detector, later reports say they did fail one. Much of the credibility of this case really comes down to the story in of itself. There's certainly characteristics we see in other cases. For example, paralysis and medical experimentation are things we see quite often in alien abduction cases. It should also be pointed out that sometimes people report traveling the galaxy and visiting distant alien planets. Most of the time, those stories are not taken seriously outside the UFO community, and even sometimes there can be skepticism. One thing that sticks out in this case is the being's lack of understanding of human emotion. We tend to see this quite a bit, and it leads many to believe aliens, such as the Greys, are robots and not biological in nature. There were also multiple witnesses, albeit a husband and a wife. Separately, while many think the being's interest in sexual intercourse seems weird and made up, it seems like it's not that far-fetched. The beings believe humans mated like animals and did so regardless of emotion. Were these beings here to see if they could acquire the one thing they don't have, human emotion? It surely seems possible. We've had reports of beings trying to study the human soul. Perhaps the beings aren't capable of acquiring human emotion in the same way humans aren't capable of being devoid of feelings.